We have got plenty to cover on this Belgian GP review. We've got Ferrari and their new upgraded rear suspension working wonders with a 3rd and 7th place finish. Oh, it burns! Mercedes, George Russell in 5th, but Antonelli out of the points. Our thoughts on the 90-minute delay before we actually got going. But let's start out front with Oscar Piastri taking the race win ahead of Lando Norris. And in the process, that championship advantage is extended to 16 points between those two drivers. Of course, that's not the way round they were at the beginning of this race. Lando Norris had got pole. He'd almost got what he wanted as well with a rolling start rather than a standing start, potentially helping him with the slipstream effect that someone in 2nd or 3rd might have on him. But even so, Oscar Piastri able to overtake Lando Norris on that first green flag racing lap. And holding the victory until the end. Let's start with the start. Harry, were you surprised with the relative ease with which Piastri managed to get by Norris?
Yes, I was. And given the from La Source all the way down up to Les Combes is just flat out these days. I know it was wet, but even so, and I say wet, barely wet.
More on that later.
Yep. It's such a slipstream fest. Even on a rolling start, I don't think it's the most surprising thing in the world, but I think I think this was potentially more Norris not playing it particularly well, and Piastri being wise to it, that helped him out. So because I think, and we saw in the sprint race yesterday with Verstappen being in P2 actually at Spa. It's like it used to be at Sochi, for example, and even maybe like Spain, where being in 2nd place is actually more advantageous because you get that slipstream effect all the way up to Les Combes, and getting a move done into La Source is utterly pointless, quite frankly. So you just need to stay close. And Norris went quite early at the restart, and Piastri stayed with him. Didn't have a great exit out of La Source, and when I was watching it, I remember saying, I remember saying out loud, Piastri's going to have him. As soon as he had that wiggle out of turn 1, I was like, there's no way he doesn't blast past. Obviously, Norris, I think trying to make up for the little wiggle, used all of his battery, but I think before it even got out the top of radio, and that helped things. So yeah, it was sort of like, Piastri playing it well, and a mix of Norris not making the most of what was a more advantageous position with a rolling start. I think he didn't particularly play that very well, and from there on in, it was difficult work for Norris to do much about it. So yeah, an impressive. What we've become accustomed to with Piastri is very impressive, and cool and calm and collected in terms of how he handled that start. Because normally you'd say that's an easy one for Norris to keep hold of, especially in the wet.
This race kind of convinced me that at this point in the season, I think we can pretty comfortably say that it's going to be one of the two McLarens that wins the Drivers' Championship at this point. I think it would take something a bit crazy for Verstappen or someone else to get in the mix. I'm convinced now that in terms of outright pace, they are just going to trade blows, one weekend after the other, and it's going to end up fairly even across the season. That's what we've had so far about halfway through. I think that's going to continue. I really think this championship is going to be decided tactically. We are going to see these little but important moments in Grand Prix that I think are going to separate the two of them. And whoever wins enough of those might well win the championship. And this was an example of one of those key defining moments, I think, as we go throughout this season. Norris doesn't get, even before we talk about La Source at turn 1, when he decides to go, he does not manage to get away from Oscar Piastri in a way that you sometimes can do on a safety car restart or a rolling start as it was here. Piastri, I think, does a really good job of staying in the slipstream almost immediately. His reaction time must have been pretty on it because there was really no gap separating Norris and Piastri as they went down to the bus stop and then through the final corner to start the lap. The last source one was in, that's where it's won and lost is turn 1. This is a bit of a rarity because ordinarily we record pretty much straight after the Grand Prix finish. We had a little bit of time today, and as a result of that, I actually managed to catch some of the post-race analysis on Sky Sports. and Davison, friend of the podcast, at the Skypad, able to dissect what happens at turn one. Piastri sends him a little dummy, and it's very clever the way that he does that. You could argue from Norris's perspective, should he be falling for that? Is Piastri ever going to really try and make that move? Given how close he was, is he ever going to try and make the move into turn one? I think it'd be quite foolish to. But Norris's exit is compromised as a result of being sold that dummy. And as you say, as soon as turn one happens, it's a bit of a waiting game. Like, it's going to happen. It's just a case of where it's going to happen. It almost got to the point where Piastri caught him too early, because we saw a couple of other times throughout the race today, other overtake attempts. We've had a few just almost have to not brake, but just get off the throttle a little bit as you go through Eau Rouge, because you've already caught up to the driver ahead. Piastri was nearly in that spot. As it happens, though, he's able to get to the outside, and the move was relatively simple. But from Norris's perspective, there'll be disappointment. From Piastri's perspective, he absolutely nailed that. So credit to him.
I was surprised how early Norris went on that start in terms of when he pinned it.
Yeah,
because he could have had the same thing would have happened if he just had crawled through all the way through Blanchimont, through the bus stop, and then gone, because no one was overtaking him there anyway. I'm surprised he decided to go for the bus stop. I mean, hindsight is a wonderful thing, etc. But yeah, I was just quite surprised. I was like, you've got a lot of time here, and the last thing you want is he lost the element of surprise in that sense. He didn't have a chance to surprise Piastri again at the bus stop because they're up to racing speed. So yeah, I'm not saying that was won or lost, but I was surprised by it.
Yeah, and then a difficult situation that he put himself in, because we've seen over the years, Hamilton and Vettel, most notably in recent times, I say recent times, it's like 7 years ago now, but we've seen Hamilton defend against Vettel, right? Going up sort of Eau Rouge and Raidillon by being quite careful about where you go for it. And you could almost halt the progress and halt the momentum of the car behind to try and keep your position. Maybe a bit more difficult because of the weather conditions, and you don't want to think maybe too much of those games, and you are just focused on the first time you're going through at racing speed, Eau Rouge and Raidillon, just doing whatever you can to keep it pinned and not go off. But it's not impossible to defend as you go through there. But from Norris's perspective, it was kind of done very early. What about the rest of the race and the way it unfolded for the McLaren duo? So we had Lando Norris go into the pits one lap later than Oscar Piastri, McLaren avoiding the double stack. But a difference in strategy with Piastri going onto the mediums alongside 18 other drivers on the grid, and Lando Norris going for a hard tyre that he was hoping would take him to the end. Now, of course, that's exactly how it happened, but Piastri's medium tyre also going all the way to the end. How did you see it play out? We saw a few errors from Lando Norris in his quest to track down Piastri. Norris did seemingly have the better pace for much of this Grand Prix.
Yeah, and I'm surprised more drivers didn't, or more teams didn't try and put a hard tyre on their cars, because there was no...
Onto the back,
yeah, why not? Because there was no guarantee that those mediums will go, especially how early we ended up pitting in terms of the race distance and how long they had left for slicks. I was surprised more didn't go for it. I know it was a bit unknown, but why not give that a go? So clearly the hard tyre was the right call. It was just not executed properly by Norris. I think again, this was another element of Norris not quite executing it properly, and Piastri was being superb with his tyre management, quite Verstappen-esque, I'd say, because they pointed out at least on the Sky broadcast at the end that Piastri then smashed out a couple of personal bests on the last couple of laps, just to show he'd been saving his tyres up. We didn't need to in the end, but yeah. So I think the hard tyre was the right way to go, and I am surprised more teams didn't try that. But yeah, as we saw, Norris was clearly pushing hard, and there's no doubt. And as you said, Ben, this is going to be like this, I think, for the rest of the season. These drivers are trading blows at basically every race, and this time round it was Piastri that had the upper hand. But they're so evenly matched that I don't want to come down too harshly on Norris here, but there were some mistakes, and they were pointing this out in the comms. Had he not had those 2 errors during the race, he probably would have been up with Piastri right as we got towards the final laps. And obviously that last one he had at La Source on the penultimate lap obviously prepared to any sort of challenge. But yeah, you'd have to say that he didn't quite execute what I think was the faster strategy in the end. The mediums could do it, and I think we saw those who 2 stopped their medium, did their 2 stints on mediums, that there wasn't really actually that much difference in terms of having a set of fresh mediums versus holding onto the ones he had. But it was clear that I think the hard tyre strategy was the better one to go for. So I think Norris will be disappointed. I think it was always going to be was always going to be a hard challenge after he lost the lead, because then he couldn't double stack. So then he pitted and came out, what was it? I don't know, 9 seconds behind, I think, when he came out after the pit stops from Inters to slicks. And I think from there, it was always an uphill challenge. So yeah, he had a tough challenge ahead of him, and fair play, he gave it a good go. There were a couple of sketchy moments with the one at Pool 1. Goodness me. He was.
Oh boy.
He should be pooing, because
who on the seat?
Yeah, literally. So he was clear he was pushing hard, and it just didn't work out from this time. But yeah, I think I am looking forward to the rest of the season for this sort of battling, because even though there was no actual battle, and it's been rare we've actually seen it this year where they go toe to toe. But it's quite enjoyable to watch. I know people might not think it is, but like them trading times and watching the sector times come down has been quite good this year. So more of that, but just maybe a little bit closer next time, and no lockups, please, Lando.
That's just reminded me, because I agree, like watching the times and seeing how it might unfold towards the end of the race is really thrilling. There was a moment on Sky Sports commentary, at least, where lead commentator David Croft is going on about the potential that Ollie Behrman could match one of his favourite statistics being outside, being in the same position for 4 races in a row that isn't a victory. And Martin Brundle completely
ignore it, went back to the back.
Yeah, straight back to like what the gap is at the front. It's exactly what everyone.
4.7. Yeah, all right. Cheers, Martin. Thank you.
I really enjoyed that.
Can I, absolute side note on this. I feel like we obviously had a delay. The longer you let Crofty commentate for, the weirder things get in what he says, what he talks about.
Honestly, I'm still not over Andy Cowell banning French fries chat. Like, what was that?
Oh, God. Anyway.
That was only 30 minutes in as well.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This should have been a toe-to-toe moment. Like, this should have been a few laps to go. Lando Norris gets DRS and we see whether he can make the pass or not. And it's partly him and it's partly not him. So the slow pit stop he had, as far as I'm aware, I know there was a question mark on the broadcast. Did he get on his marks exactly? Looked all right to me. Yeah. But a slow stop, which definitely cost him a little bit of time there. Ultimately, him coming in on the lap after Oscar Piastri definitely hurt him. Equally, they might as well have double stacked it, probably. I think the amount of time that he lost being out there for another lap, plus the slow stop anyway, I think they might have, even if he would have lost a little bit as a result of the double stack, it still might have been worth doing that. But equally, the reason why he has to be second in the queue is because he lost the lead at the start. So some of it is team related, and then obviously some of it is error related. There were a few notable errors that we saw throughout the Grand Prix. If you add them up, he was only, with 2 laps to go, maybe 4 seconds or so off the lead of the Grand Prix. They might not have added up to 4 seconds, but they definitely added up to close to 4 seconds, to the point where could he have got DRS? Would he have been able to overtake, even with DRS, a car that is obviously the same level as his? I don't know. But I think Norris will look at this one and say, this was a bit of a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
There have been a few there have been a few race wins this season, like Spain, for example, where I think Norris just has to hold his hands. Like Piastri was better that day. Here,
yeah, I agree. And also, again, like you say, the mistakes may not have added up to those 4 seconds, but it's the, I know, so we're dealing in what ifs, but it might have been 2.5 seconds, and then he's in his mirrors, and then that's a completely different scenario, isn't it? So even if he's not right on the back of him, I think it changes the dynamic of that battle entirely. So yeah, I agree. I think he will, and like we've already said, I think it will be they'll go back and forth a lot this year, and he's walked away with this one with the loss from pole, but yeah, I think he'll be secretly disappointed with how that went.
Yeah. So now 16 points separating them, far from over. Of course, many races still to go. One more before the summer break, and then a host of races after that. Shall we review our bold predictions?
Sure.
It won't take very long, because if you have got the abacus out and you're keeping track of how many we've scored so far this year, you won't have to do any hand action. Harry, you said that there would be a completely different sprint 1, 2, 3 and a main race 1, 2, 3. I happen to see both Piastri and Norris on both of those podiums.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I should have said they were in different positions, and then I'd have been totally right. But no, it was not to be. And I've figured that maybe some wet weather would play havoc. But again, we'll get onto this. We didn't really see much wet weather racing, so it didn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of not quite, myself and Sam decided to get all aboard the Ferrari hype train as a result of their new upgrade that was going to completely revolutionize their season. They got a podium in the former Charles Leclerc, and oh boy, a nail biter to the flag as Leclerc finished just under a pit stop behind, 20 seconds off the pace of the leader. So that's not right.
I know we're going to get onto Ferrari. You should have known that this wasn't going to work, because they tested these upgrades in Mugello earlier in the week, and then when Lewis Hamilton was asked about it, he was like, "It wasn't a test; it was a filming day." And I was like, "Oh boy, they they not what you want them to be, are they?"
Nah. We are, of course, today reviewing the Belgian Grand Prix, but it was a Belgian Grand Prix that started pretty much when it should have ended. I think we had about 90 minutes separating the formation lap that we had at the top of the hour at the time when we were supposed to start, pretty much, and then much later on when it was decided that we couldn't go racing for quite a long time. What did you make of it all?
It made me want to repeatedly punch myself in the face, because that would actually be more enjoyable. I was just, and I know we've been here before, and it's just so frustrating because as lifelong fans, we are frustrated by this. I can't imagine what it's like as a newer fan to this sport, because it would drive me mad. But what is going on? What are you doing? Firstly, I want to say, because I know that we are harsh on the FIA and the stewarding quite often, and I feel quite fairly. And when we talk about penalties and how the show of the sport shouldn't affect the penalties, and they are two separate things. Having said that, there needs to be a degree of logic in what is being done, and to actually think about, I'm not saying think about the show, but logically think about what is the product of F1, the sport that you are the governing body of here, because everything is so slow and so, it feels so backwards, and communication I know they obviously speak to the teams, but the communication outwardly to the people, the public. Imagine you're in the grandstand and you just sat in the rain. Yeah. I'd be furious. I'd just go home. Especially for Spa, because they've been here before.
Belgium.
I'd walk home.
Walk home.
Yeah, I've had enough of this. So I understand the initial first call they did the formation lap and then they suspended it immediately. And I know I can see both sides of, well, why didn't we send them around for a few more laps, see if it clears water? But with that extra band of rain coming in, what I think we would have potentially ended up with was a few laps of racing, which, yes, you can argue is fine, but I think we still would have ended up in the same position after a few laps anyway. So I can see the argument behind that and for holding. And I'm glad that they didn't start the clock and everything. That was obviously all confirmed a bit later on, but the fact we only had one formation lap, that nothing has started here. We're actually going to hold wait. I'm okay with that. And we see it in a bit more so in America and in racing in America, but rain delays are often a thing, and I'm okay with that. So fine. What frustrates me the most is then how slow it is to get going again, because once that band of rain had come through, honestly, the moment the first camera shot, there was some people in the crowd and they were right on the front row of a covered grandstand and they had sun on their face, and I was just like, let's go now, or at least send out the medical car, because it was at least another 10 minutes before that, before even the medical car went out. And by that point, we were more than ready to go. And then the medical car stops. I think we wait another 5 minutes. Then we get the call, and it's a 15-minute, then another 15 minutes before the cars actually get going. That drives me. I had to go and do something else because it drives me insane. It drives me up the wall that the fastest sport in the world can be this slow on getting a race going, because I appreciate all the safety concerns. I 100% do, and the visibility 100%. But why? They've got all these amazing weather forecasting systems. They can look up in the sky when the rain is starting to stop. Tell them all to start getting ready. Why are they not sat in the cars ready to go? So when it does seem like a save, so even the moment this medical car, because clearly the medical car did a recce lap, said it was safe to send them out. When the medical car's done that, safe to send them out, let's roll. Let's roll out now, because we're just wasting time. And obviously they had the 2 minimum laps behind the safety car, but I think we ended up with 4 in the end. But it was getting dry by the time it started. It was getting dry in places, and it's just what is the point in wet weather racing? Because if we're going to do it like that, we might as well just never race in the wet and always wait for it to be dry. And I think what is most frustrating as well is, and it's quite a Spa specific thing, the visibility is always worse at Spa because the spray gets kicked up and then it just hangs in the trees. The nature of Spa, it always does. But we had Silverstone 3 weeks ago where the rain was way worse and we didn't have these stoppages or these delays. And then you get to Spa and we have this, and it just seems to be farcical when we come here. And I think it's the nature of the track and the layout and everything. And we love the track for it. But they've got to find a way. We're continuing to race here. I know it's going to go on alternate years, but we've got to find a way around it for this track, because it does rain here quite often. We can't keep going on like this because it's so slow. So, it's really annoying. It's just lame. I was looking at it, and when we finally started the race and it was drying up, I was like, well, this is just because we've lost all the element of what would be a dramatic wet race, and I was like, they're going to be on dry soon, so we might as well just waited till it got fully dry and done a dry race, because that probably would have been more interesting, quite frankly. So thank you, FIA. Welcome back from a holiday.
Yeah, they timed it perfectly just for that. You to come back from your holiday and then immediately need another one for a month, because that's the result of today's Grand Prix. You mentioned, like, obviously we're hardcore fans, aren't we? We've been fans for a long time, and we'll stick around no matter what. But you do have to question what this would have looked like for a new fan. And I mean, as we saw today, very, very much front and center, there can be a lot of new fans at the moment. We got that straight away from the intro.
Oh,
the F1 intro.
Oh God, I can't even talk. I can't talk about that. What are you? No, carry on, Ben.
The revamped F1 intro, presumably for just this Grand Prix.
Oh, please, just for this Grand Prix, please.
I think it will be, but like it was direct from the F1 movie, and that's a relevant time to bring this up, because there probably will be a lot of new fans watching right about now because of the F1 movie, and this is their introduction to our sport, and they've gone again. You've just wasted like hundreds of millions of dollars on a budget for this film to then have this farce. Like, come on. In terms of like the start of the Grand Prix, like I say start, I mean the intended initial start. I am okay with the fact that if we couldn't go racing at that point, we couldn't go racing. But I think two things need to happen before we can fully decide that didn't happen today. Firstly, if you're not on the wet weather tyre, I don't think we can make a decision as to whether we can go racing or not. If you're out there on a tyre that is not the intended tyre for that type of weather, and you're saying it sprays too much, can't go racing, but you're not even trying the tyre that is supposed to work in those conditions, whether it does or doesn't is another thing, but you've got to at least be circulating on the wet weather tyre before we can call this. And secondly, this was raised by Max Verstappen. Again, maybe it doesn't actually make a difference. Can we come up with a solution where we can have these drivers going round for a few laps at least to see if they can clear some of the water? I would be okay with some sort of idea where, let's say, you're in this situation today, you're out there on the wet weather tyre, you go around for 4 or 5 laps, water doesn't clear. Okay, you bring everyone back in, we can't go racing yet. And then you're allowed to refuel back to the original point. And then you've still got a full race if you can then go racing again. And you set however many laps you want as the maximum you can do that for. But I just don't think we were in an accurate enough place to actually say whether we could go racing or not, because they're not on the right bloody tyre.
The wet weather, and there's so many people, there's so much discourse on this, like, and so many memes about what's the point in that tyre? But seriously, why are Pirelli lugging that tyre around the world? For what reason? Because it's never, even at a point when it is used in a race, we see now drivers don't want to go on it because as soon as the rain gets too much for that for an Inter, we end up red flagging a race anyway. So they don't bother putting the wet tyre on because you lose out anyway. It's just, it should be and we've had it before. I mean, it's quite a long time ago now, but I think Fuji 2007, which is like another world away in terms of wet weather racing.
Don't show the FIA that race. They would be shocked at their own actions.
But that I'm pretty sure, I'm gonna have to go back and check it. I'm pretty sure that race start was mandated on the wet. Everyone had to be on the wet tyre. I'm pretty sure Ferrari didn't, and they were told to pit because that's classic Ferrari. But
sure, we
can do that today. We're going to do this behind the safety car. All of you put the wet weather tyres on because that in itself will help clear water, as you said. Even if it's just to do your idea of just circulating for a bit, it will chuck up more water than the Inter does. So, honestly, what is the point in that tyre? Stupid.
The other thing that you mentioned, which is maybe a bit more of a Spa-specific issue, is that it's annoying enough when you have a delay, but sometimes it's necessary. Like if you are seriously in danger of aquaplaning and these cars just might fly off the circuit without anything the drivers can do about it. Like you can understand a stoppage, you can understand why it can't go ahead. That wasn't the situation today. We heard from the drivers on that formation lap. The standing water was okay. It wasn't that much of an issue. The issue is the spray, it's the visibility. And we saw, I think, was in onboard from Daniel Ricciardo from a couple of years ago, and how little you can actually see. And you can understand it at that point. But I think that's what we need to go after, is working out how we can possibly reduce that. Because if we are in a situation where the standing water isn't enough of an issue to get going, yet we still can't because of the spray, it's very difficult to see how this could have gone any other way.
I have seen some suggestions that we obviously have ground effect cars, which we won't again as of next year, but whether it's because it's been quite a particular issue in this era of F1, hasn't it? The spray.
Yeah.
And whether that will change again next year. But yeah, something needs to be done. Because my blood pressure can't take watching nothing for 90 minutes.
You're right. The thing that annoyed me the most, though, was the getting started after the delay itself was a little bit annoying, but you can understand it to an extent. Not getting started about 20 minutes before we actually did is inexcusable. how have we got to a point where it is so slow? Today's race was a quarter of a Grand Prix on intermediate tyres and 3/4 of a Grand Prix on dry tyres. That should not have been that should have been a quarter of a Grand Prix on wet tyres, a quarter of a Grand Prix on intermediate tyres, half a Grand Prix on dries. If we start like 20 minutes earlier, as I think we should have done, there's no reason why we couldn't have gone a little bit earlier than what we did. And even behind the safety car, we're out there like 2 laps behind a safety car more than we need to, for sure.
I'm like, fine. 2 laps behind the safety car, we're doing that. That's fine. I'm happy with that. Everyone get used to what's going on and then send them. And then go, because I know we're not in the cars, but it was clear the spray was nothing compared to what it was when we did this the first time round. And I appreciate the drivers that are the ones in the car. They're asking for their opinions, but they're always going to say the spray's bad because they're in it. They are in the spray, but they're going to keep saying it's sprayy until it dries up, and then what? And it's interesting. You've got, and this is not me pointing fingers at anyone here, so please don't come after me. But they asked Oscar Piastri, who was in P2 at that point, and he said, well, the spray's still pretty bad on the Kemmel Straight, wasn't it? And then there was a radio from Lewis Hamilton who was like, it's basically dry. It's like that's 2 lots of experience there, isn't it? Where one driver who's racing maybe a slightly different era of F1 and a newer one. But yeah, it was so slow and like you said, 20 minutes. I'd say even more. Like I would be, and maybe I'm a bit more dash with this, but I think they could have gone as soon as that sunshine came out. I think they could have started sending them around, at least for reconnaissance laps at that point. But never mind.
I'm sure the FIA will have a look at their actions and do something about it very, very soon. Yeah,
it's also I feel like they thought they were offering some sort of like not alternative, but something good with but when we do get racing, the cars can be 20 car lengths at the safety cars out. I'm like, great. I'm so pleased. And actually, I think that was worse because then they were accelerating and braking quite a lot. And I was like, someone's going to plow into the back of another car here. And then look where we are. The safety car will never end. Oh, God.
You know what? Actually, changing it from 10 car lengths to 20 car lengths has actually changed my mind completely. I think Ben Sulayem should be reinstated as president later this year.
Why?
That's done it for me.
Oh, that reason.
I just think it's a great idea.
It was his idea. Yeah. That's why he was like, this will get him.
Yeah. I'm having Ben Sulayem as my full support now. So well done to you, sir. Should we do driver of the day?
Yeah. Mylander.
The verdict is in. You're the driver of the day. You're the driver of the day. You're good at driving.
I'm going to start by nominating Alex Albon. He was my driver of the day. P6 in that Williams. Not too shabby whatsoever. And he was a long way clear of anyone who wasn't in a Ferrari, a Mercedes, a Red Bull, or a McLaren. Like Liam Lawson is a long way back then in 8th place. Tip for Carlos Sainz: do the right part of the weekend well.
Yeah,
right? They've essentially got the same result, but one of them's led to 8 points, the other's led to 3. But yeah, credit to Alex Albon. I thought he was. Look, I mean, George Russell got past him. Sure, that's going to happen. But I thought the rest of the race he managed really well. I think it was your driver of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair shout. Albon was on my list. I've also want to shout out Pierre Trulli, as he shall now be known.
That car should have been nowhere near the point, man. Nowhere near. That car is garbage.
Oh, it's so bad. The
as soon as it dried up, they were awful.
The size of that rear wing, though, it was like a tea tray. It was ridiculous. But yeah, I thought, again, pretty impressive doing anything with that car. Also, I want to mention Hamilton because I know it's his own fault he was that far down. But I feel, and I know he had a really wet setup on, but with that wet setup, he looked after his tyres well and in the wet made the most of it. I mean, he overtook 3 cars in one lap at one point, which was pretty sick. But the one I am going to go for is Charles Leclerc because I don't think that Ferrari should be anywhere near the podium.
In the rain, he was holding on for dear life.
Yeah, and I want to shout that out because I think it flew under the radar slightly. I think that Leclerc-Verstappen battle or defense was superb, and I think it didn't get enough airtime in terms of what he was doing, because you watch it from onboard Verstappen or outboard on the track cameras. That Ferrari didn't want to hit an apex, didn't want to do it. It was four-wheel drifting everywhere by the time we got to the end of that first stint. No, I thought Leclerc was superb, and obviously Piastri as well. That's like an obvious one, but I'll go with Leclerc because I just don't think that Ferrari should have been third.
What about the other side of things? Worst driver of the day?
Get in the bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin. Worst driver of the day. You suck at driving.
Who have you got for this one?
I really struggle with this one because I didn't think anyone was...
20 finishes.
20 finishes. I didn't think anyone was particularly crap. I know he got a bit mugged off by the strategy, but Hadjar wasn't particularly quick today.
No, he wasn't.
And I know it went downhill because he got caught out with the first stop, but then it didn't go uphill anymore. It went more downhill as it went along. So I'll nominate him, but I feel a bit harsh because there was no one really that stood out, particularly as being really rubbish.
I'm also going with Hadjar with an asterisk because as soon as, yes, he got mugged off by strategy, absolutely. For the rest of that Grand Prix, he was so slow to the point where I'm not convinced there wasn't something wrong with that car. When he came into the pits the second time, I wasn't sure if it was just going to be to retire because there was something wrong with the car that we just hadn't heard about. He was that slow. Well, so if it turns out that there's something...
Also, because Stroll flew past him on the Camel Straight and that Aston Martin was slow in a straight line. So I was like, that looks a bit suspect. But yeah, anyway.
Yes, that Aston Martin wasn't particularly quick in a straight line, as Alonso can probably attest to for the majority of this Grand Prix. But yeah, I'll go with Hadjar, but I'm not certain on that one. Big brain Strat.
Bob, we're going to need you to box for wets. What? It's not even raining out. What are you talking about? Yeah, and Bob, if you get a chance, let your teammate pass you. What? He crashed out. He's not even in the race.
A day filled with strategic choices, so maybe a few to choose from. What have you gone for?
Haas, mate. What are you doing with Esteban?
That was bad, wasn't it?
What are you doing with Esteban? That's my nomination. The last person to change from the intermediates. He comes out in last place and he's about 10 seconds off 19th. I understand it was. I'm assuming it's because Behrman and him were close together.
Yeah,
double stack. I think him backing off and double stacking was better than that. It was a terrible call. So I'll nominate that one.
Yes, that is an absolutely valid shout. They should have double stacked there. And maybe all of the teams will be a bit annoyed that no one went for it. There were a few drivers that came in on lap 11. So that was the likes of Hülkenberg, Gasly, Hamilton. Maybe lap 10 was the one. Like maybe Haas lap 10, lap 11 for their two drivers, because as soon as it was really a question of tire temperature, wasn't it? Like those guys that had pit the lap before, they came out in a similar spot to the guys that then came into the pits the next lap, but their tires were up to temp, and we saw Hülkenberg and Gasly and a few others really take advantage of that. So yeah, a rough one from Haas. Mine somewhat relates to that because one driver and one team that got it absolutely right was Nico Hülkenberg and Sauber, similar to how they got the strategy absolutely right at Silverstone. It saw Hülkenberg, who had been somewhat struggling, I think, throughout the weekend. He managed to go all the way from, the sort of 14th, 15th, or wherever he was at the time, into the points directly behind his teammate, directly in front of his teammate until they switched positions. A very comfortable 9th, 10th for them. Gasly's nowhere near, and he's leading a train with so many cars behind. And Sauber decide, let's pit him again.
But under no pressure.
For no reason.
That's such a valid point. I didn't even think about that. There's no reason to pit Hulkenberg. Yeah.
Yeah. They just gave Alpine a point just for trying, I think. But like, yeah, he made a good effort of getting back through the field as well, Hulkenberg. Like he made overtakes on Lance Stroll and Yuki Tsunoda and to the point where he was right behind Gasly and Behrman at the end. But he then still would have been like 20 seconds behind Bortoletto, which is where he was at one point in this Grand Prix. So
yeah. Antonelli and Alonso, I understand the call. Hulkenberg, sure. No need.
Yeah, like a really good strategy call to put him in that spot. And then they just managed to like put him right back to where he was as a result of the second call. Not great.
Good.
We've discussed McLaren finishing first and second, which leads us on to Charles Leclerc, who finished in third place. His teammate, driver of the day, voted by the fans, Lewis Hamilton, finishing in seventh. A bit of a question going into this weekend as to whether they would find a bit more competitiveness as a result of this long-awaited upgrade of their rear suspension. No. They weren't winning.
No, is the answer. Yeah. They were not winning is a good way to summarize that one, Ben.
They probably think they were winning.
Well, yeah, they maximised the points and they could for the weekend. I'm gonna again, and I feel like I've given Ferrari maybe quite a lot of slack here this year. I'm gonna just slightly reserve judgment until we get to Hungary. Just see what happens there. Very different circuit. It's probably going to be drier than this weekend, but just see. But on the face of it, it's done absolutely nothing at all. Nothing. Their relative. It's hard. Why I'm struggling is because their relative pace to McLaren. McLaren were miles in front, and it was only taking, a skinny rear wing from Max Verstappen in the sprint, and I think what was quite a superb quali lap from Leclerc, and obviously a great performance in the race, for anyone to be slightly near, but they're so far up the road that it makes no difference. So it means the gap to them, the relative gap, is quite hard to judge whether actually these upgrades are working. My overall takeaway, and again, I'll caveat just a little bit, I reserve a little bit of judgment for Hungary, but my overall takeaway is, why are you bothering now? Let's stop. Like, give it. You've tried. Commendable. Write it off this year. Maybe
they've tried. I don't know.
Well, we think they've tried. And yeah, but write it off, because there's nothing. There's nothing about the upgrades they've been bringing has been revolutionary in terms of pace. But what's the point? This year's gone, and that's fine. I mean, it's not great, but it's fine. The big one is 26 onwards. So yeah, I don't think they're going to be massively happy. And as I said earlier on, after both drivers tested it or filmed it on their filming day at Mugello, the feedback was not overwhelmingly positive, which was a quote I saw, which is, that's not a great place to start with your rear suspension upgrade. Again, difficult to judge on a testing day, but it's not produced maybe the results they were hoping for. And Hamilton, I know he was great, he was good in the race today, but Hamilton during the weekend has suffered quite a lot. And there were obviously the rear locking thing he had in sprint quali, and then obviously the track limits error in real quali put him down and hampered his weekend. But overall, that Ferrari's not looked. I think Leclerc was dragging a result of it. I don't think that Ferrari looked particularly great still.
I have positives and negatives, surprisingly.
Okay, it's balanced, that's good.
What would you like me to start with?
Let's go negative first and then end on a positive note. Right.
So the negatives. That car is still awful in the wet. Like, it's so bad in the rain. We've seen it in Australia. We saw it last time at Silverstone. And we saw it with specifically Charles Leclerc hustling with a capital H to keep it ahead of Max Verstappen. Right? That car is awful in the wet. That's one of the main negatives. The other negative that I wanted to point out is throughout this season, they have really struggled with plank wear and the potential for plank wear if they don't manage it throughout the Grand Prix. I think one of the hopes of this rear suspension would be that they don't have to deal with that anymore and they can just go a bit more flat out in these races. What do we hear like 3/4 of the way through this Grand Prix? Lewis Hamilton is lifting and coasting way more than anyone else, which has been the problem all year. So if they haven't solved that, that is a massive concern. Because if this upgrade hasn't solved that, it might just be unsolvable, which is not great news for Ferrari. So that's the easy negatives. There are, maybe it's mitigating factors rather than positives, but I'm going to run with it. Lewis Hamilton couldn't get past Alex Albon, which I know is a disappointment given you would expect a Ferrari to be able to make its way past the Williams. I'm going to give him a pass on that because, and this is another one of my annoyances with the delay of the race start, we had multiple drivers go for a fully wet setup that were punished for it because we didn't get wet weather running for very long at all. So Lewis Hamilton made some good overtakes early on in this Grand Prix. A couple of really nice ones into the bus stop chicane, I thought. But then as soon as it dries up, that car doesn't have anything in a straight line and he is stuck behind Alex Albon, not able to make that move. So I think that is largely setup related. The other positive I did want to mention is they did finish 20 seconds behind Piastri, did Leclerc. Not great. A lot of that was in the first quarter of the Grand Prix. Like Leclerc was losing a lot of time in those wet conditions that this Ferrari is not suited to at all. As soon as we got into the dry conditions, it wasn't too bad. Like Piastri with his strategy and not knowing whether the mediums would go to the end, I'm convinced that he and McLaren, if they could have got it, would have wanted that safety car gap over Leclerc as a bit of an insurance policy if Piastri needed to pit again. So I am not like going to buy, Piastri was just managing out front. He could have gone way faster if he needed to. Sure, there would have been a bit of managing, but I think McLaren would have been keen to get that safety car gap back to Leclerc if they could have got it, which kind of tells me that Leclerc's pace might have been genuine in P3. It's not like Leclerc was catching over them, but he wasn't massively losing when we got to dry conditions. So that is the maybe slightly more positive view of this upgrade in what is a sea of quite a lot of negatives.
Just little islands of positivity in a massive ocean of negativity.
Pretty much. And that is Ferrari in a nutshell. I tell you what, though, they scored more points than Mercedes did today. George Russell managing to gain one position on his qualifying spot to finish in P5. Bit of a lonely race for him, really, as soon as he made that overtake on Alex Albon. Antonelli, though, no points yet again. What did you make of their two races?
George Russell, I wasn't sure if he was still there, really, because he was so lonely out there.
He's still going. No one's told him it's over.
He's still going around. Yeah, look, I think Russell got the most out of his race. There wasn't much, I don't think there's much more in that car, and that car didn't look good this weekend. It's mad, isn't it? Because the Mercedes last year, they were 1-2. I know one of them got disqualified. But that cool. We had like cool conditions. Same for this weekend. Last year, and they were not dominant, but they were quick. And this year they were poo-poo. So yeah, I think Russell did actually quite a good job and probably flew under the radar slightly with what he did there. I don't think, he got past Albon. I don't think there's much more he could have done because I don't think that Mercedes had the pace of the Red Bull or the Ferrari in terms of Verstappen and Leclerc. Antonelli just, I think the summer break is needed. I've seen a lot of people sort of coming down slightly harshly on him and saying that, it's too soon and he's been shoved into the limelight. And I don't think that's particularly fair. I think he needs to have a bit of a turnaround. I think he needs a confidence boost. He's lacking somewhat some of the confidence I think he had earlier in the season. But today was already done after quali yesterday. I think that's where this all lies. I know there are obviously slightly mixed conditions, but how difficult it actually was to overtake. it just meant that it was really never going to happen for Antonelli. I know they also did the pit lane start and did the same thing as Hamilton in terms of an Alonso and Sainz on a wet setup that obviously they couldn't even use in the end because of the stupid delay. So, I just think he needs a little reset. Get Hungary out the way. Go away for have a summer holiday, mate. Have an ice cream and come back. Come back for the next half of the season. So. Not a good weekend, but I've got no doubt that the speed is there. I don't think this is disastrous. I don't think we should start saying, "Oh, it's too soon." Blah blah blah. I think he just needs an arm around his shoulder, and I've got full belief that that's what Toto Wolff would be doing. And putting a hat on him, I'm sure.
With his massive hand.
Big hand. He just needs a big hand around his shoulder. That's what I meant. Sorry.
For George Russell's side of the garage, I was disappointed that not necessarily in George Russell, but in Mercedes as a whole, that they didn't have more pace when it dried out. Because of all the teams, they're kind of the ones that were banking on it being a dry Grand Prix. George Russell was lightning quick in the first and final sectors in qualifying yesterday. In fact, he was the quickest driver. Purple sectors, Sector 1 and Sector 3. He was then also the slowest car in the middle sector. So they are hoping for a dry Grand Prix, and they kind of got it. They got a 3/4 dry Grand Prix. And as soon as Russell was on the back of Leclerc and Verstappen after the pit stops, I was like, okay, given how they've set up this car, he might be able to stick with these two. I don't know whether he'll get past, but he can stick with these two guys. He couldn't. And that was worrying for Mercedes, that he dropped back as much as he did. But even so, P5 on a weekend when Mercedes really struggled, that might not be a bad result. From Antonelli's side of the garage, a couple of things here. Firstly, I think he was probably one of the victims of setting up that car to be far better in wet conditions. Of course, he had a pit lane start with a few others. And I don't think it's helped him at all in this Grand Prix. The real telling sign was after his second stop. So Hülkenberg had a second stop, so did Antonelli. Hülkenberg flew past Esteban Ocon, and Antonelli was directly behind both of those two. By the time they had got to the same point on the next lap, Hülkenberg was over 3 seconds clear of Ocon, and Antonelli is still behind Ocon. Like, he couldn't get past him with how quick that car was in a straight line. He was losing, because he had the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. He had way more pace than he could show, but he was just stuck behind Esteban Ocon. And that's, I think, largely setup related. I'm not overly concerned with where Antonelli's at. I think the most accurate way I think I can put it is this Mercedes is not quite as good as it was earlier in the season. And whereas I think with Russell, if you took two tenths or 2.5 tenths away of pace from Russell and what he had at the beginning of this season, that's still good enough for where he's finished today. That's still good enough for fifth. I think with where Antonelli's pace is at the moment, if you take 2.5 tenths away from where he was at the beginning of this season, picking up P6s quite regularly, that puts him firmly in the midfield battle. And then weird things start to happen like what we saw today. So you're right. Get an ice cream down your boy, have a good summer break, and come back well rested.
Yeah, I'm also like, I get it. This isn't a finishing school F1. It's the pinnacle. But he's the boy's in year one. He's done half a year of F1. I'm like, this isn't end of the world stuff. Everyone, let him develop a bit, please.
He's so young, he might be in year one. They have plucked him out of year one in school, I'm pretty sure. What about the rest of the midfield? So Liam Lawson scoring some valuable points, 4 points for 8th place. Gabriel Bortoleto, another rookie who's done quite well here, finishing in 9th for 2 points. And Pierre Gasly in his Alpine or tractor, depending on what you want to call it today, scoring 1 point. Thoughts on how the midfield went and those three drivers scoring points?
Lawson, again, slightly anonymous race, but I thought very solid. He unlike his teammate, didn't get screwed over by strategy, but executed his race well.
I'm not sure why.
Yeah, because wasn't he behind him?
Hatchell was ahead.
Yeah. Not sure how that's happened, guys. But even so, at least he executed what when he was given the right strategy. So, and I'm glad to see for Lawson like a couple of good performances that we were used to hear him doing when it was in Visa Cash Out last year, which is ridiculous. So yeah, solid from him. Bortoleto, I think, continues to like quietly impress. I think he's probably above expectations for this year in general. And interestingly, they interviewed whilst we were waiting on Sky. They interviewed Mattia Binotto, and he made the point that whilst the Sauber at the start of the year was, well, he didn't say this, but it was trying to kill its drivers on every first lap, Bortoleto struggled, and quite frankly, that's fair enough. Again, another rookie, whereas Hulkenberg probably could deal with it slightly better because he's been around the block. Now that the car's a bit better for Sauber, Bortoleto is able to show his pace. So I think, yeah, that's sort of continuing that trend. And yeah, I mean, Pierre Gasly, Jarno Gasly, whatever you want to call him, ridiculous. Give that man a better car, for crying out loud. Like, that's just, it's just not. Do you remember Bahrain when they had a good car and that was it? This year.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only time.
No one has ever worked harder for 1 point. 1 point.
It's ridiculous. It doesn't deserve 1 point. Gasly deserves more than 1 point. That car doesn't deserve 1 point. It deserves minus points. It's terrible.
Yeah. And it should have been 11th, but thank you to Sauber and Nico Hulkenberg for giving him a point today. He did exceptional. He was a contender for driver of the day for sure, because not only is that car, I think, the slowest on the grid, I'm not sure it's that close. Maybe track to track it will change a bit, but I was pretty convinced that, again, it was as soon as it dried up, he and Colapinto just could not keep up with the guys in front. So for him to, even with that incredibly skinny rear wing, for him to keep his position, I thought was very impressive. Lawson and Bortoleto, great jobs from both of them. Lawson, I'm not sure why he didn't come into the pits the lap after, because he managed to get priority. So well played. I don't know how you've done it, but well played, Liam Lawson. Even so, he was directly behind Isaac Hadjar. Like, he matched his pace all throughout that first stint. And then as soon as he was kind of released into 8th place, really solid. And after, the Austrian GP, where he had a really good result as well. That's a couple of nice performances from Lawson recently. Bortoleto, I agree with what you mentioned with Binotto's interview, because I think at the beginning of the season, that car was in such a bad spot that Bortoleto was probably being made to look worse than what he was actually doing. And now that car is capable of at least competing with their midfield rivals. He can actually do something. Like, he had to ask the team to get by Nico Hulkenberg on the same tyre, same circumstance, because he was quicker than him. And he's now out-qualified Hulkenberg more times than vice versa, coming off a year where Hulkenberg absolutely destroyed Magnussen in qualifying in their season at Haas. So I think he's doing a very good job, and a well-earned 2 points here. It's time for moment of the race. Harry, I assume this is going to be the incredibly long delay we had.
Oh yeah, all 90 minutes of it. It was my favourite. A few contenders here. This one is very Sky specific, but they were so bored they got a picture of Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg on a quad bike.
They did,
which was interesting.
Can I just mention something with Nico Rosberg very quickly, because he did a grid walk with Martin Brundle, and you could just, like, the inner naughty child in Rosberg just wanted to do everything that Brundle was telling him not to do.
Yeah. The question to Jos Verstappen about, now you're quiet. But it's genius. That's perfect. So good. And also, he's going after Nico Hulkenberg, and you can hear Martin Brundle going, "We're not allowed to interview them at 30 seconds. Oh, he's gone. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
God love Nico Rosberg on the TV broadcast. Another Sky specific one, and this goes back to what I was saying about the lead commentator, David Croft. Who is Tyre Degradation Cliff? Do you know him?
Oh, my God. Oh. That sent me. I was fuming.
Oh, it was so bad. It was so bad. It was almost good.
I wrote down another David Croft. I almost forgot about this. He said something else that really annoyed me today. Oh, it was Esteban Ocon, and they panned to
Yes.
his girlfriend in the pits, who is called Flavie, saying, "Flavie in the pits, savvy on track." What is that?
Do you know what? Sometimes, not to sound like Kevin Malone here, sometimes less word do trick. Just say less. Oh, so yeah, sorry. So that one going. But my moment of the race, it's a similar one to I've had previously, but something happened to Antonelli. I can't remember what the reaction was now, either a pit stop or no. It was he went for that overtake on Ocon, but overcooked it and went a bit wide, and Ocon got him back. And then they panned to another Toto Wolff reaction shot. He's not wearing a flat cap this time, but his headphones, and this will be video only, his headphones are like this. They're like on the front of his head. He's just sat looking disappointed with his headphones so far forward. I was like, is he doing this as a game now? Is he trying to get our moment of the race? It just really made me laugh. I was like, Toto, it will get better, son. But I can't wait to see which hat he's going to bring out for Hungary. Or I say hat, it could be Toto's headgear. Maybe that's the branching out. So
expanding his repertoire. Yes.
Yeah.
My moment of the race is similar to yours. In fact, it might have been even the same moment that led to this, to the point where I thought we might have ended up with the same thing. But Antonelli, we know that in his brief career in F1, he doesn't mind being a bit late on the brakes, doesn't mind doing something a little bit wild, to the point where the F1 broadcast at one point in the first stint thought he was on mediums when he was very much on intermediate tyres. I just thought, yeah, that's what they think of Antonelli, is that he would be on medium tyres in these conditions. Why not?
It's a classic Antonelli move. Just go for slicks on the rain.
Why not?